On today's show, we have a conversation with a young professional who studied psychology and has a master's in life coaching. And we venture into the depths of the human spirit in building, designing, and planning the future that you want to achieve. And she is also a self published poet who puts her emotions out there for the world to be blessed by. Hello and welcome to the Everyday Calling Podcast. My name is Guy Smith and I'm your host. Welcome to the podcast where we have wonderful conversations with everyday people about things that they love to do, things they love about their life, how they discovered it, why it matters to them, why it matters to the world, and how that can change your life as well. I'm honored and excited that you're here with me today. I have a wonderful guest by the name of Mackenzie Barr, but living on borrowed time with that. Soon we're going to be Mackenzie Triponey.
Yeah.
Mackenzie, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
I'm doing good. We're recording this the day after Thanksgiving, so everybody is filled up and rested.
And still sleepy from the turkey.
And still sleepy from the turkey. Yeah, absolutely. Mackenzie, why don't we have some various topics that we want to talk about today, ranging from psychology to life coaching to poetry and whatever other kinds of passions that you have that you want to share with us today. Why don't we kind of just start with, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your story, your childhood. Where'd you come from? Who is Mackenzie Barr Triponey?
Well, I grew up most of my life in Punxsutawney with my parents and my younger sister, Maddie. I always did pretty well in school. I've loved school, so I just got my master's in life coaching. So that's where a lot of my passions lie right now, is in psychology and life coaching. And I'm currently unemployed, but that's the kind of job I'll be looking for pretty soon once I move.
Okay. So what was the pull towards studying psychology?
Going into college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I felt like I could do anything, and like there were so many options, and I was just overwhelmed. So I started out undecided and just did a bunch of gen eds at IUP Punxsutawney, and I took a Psych 101 class, and the information just clicked. Like it just made sense, and the studying never felt like work, and I really enjoyed all the readings and all the assignments, and it just made sense to me. So I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I like this. So I just majored in that. And I actually got 2 minors, one in theater. That was kind of an accident. But I had a lot of fun with that too, like applied theater performance and simulation work. And that was a lot of fun. And it worked into psychology a lot too. I really found my passion in applied psychology. I enjoyed the research aspect of it when I was studying it in school, but my passion was in more of counseling and things of that nature.
Okay. I like how you called theater an accident.
It was an accident. A happy accident.
Yeah, and that's something that you probably still learn some skills in that you're applying throughout your life.
Yeah.
In some really cool ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stage presence and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I took a course that was the performance of caring. That's what it was called. It was a theater course, but it counted as a psychology elective. And it was a lot about the body language and tone of voice in empathy and how you can actually learn that and practice that to use in conversations with people. And that was really interesting.
Okay. That sounds important. I know, like, when you and I, that was, when we talk about this, one of the things I think about was, so we did premarital counseling, mm-hmm. and I had the honor of doing that with you guys. Yeah. And in the premarital counseling material, right, you kind of go into some of those types of, what are personalities and conversations and communicating with your future spouse and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I always look at it, so like for you, knowing that you had been studying all that, that's always a little bit intimidating to me, because I'm kind of like, oh, she's getting this better than I am, deeper than I am. So it's kind of a journey just to kind of walk through that together. And it's always really neat to see how you're interacting with your family, interacting with your future husband, interacting with, you're babysitting our kids, all those kind of things is, and so how has that really, how have the things that you learned, like, so some of these things are natural in life, right? We grow up, we know how to work with people, we know how to talk to people. We all think we know how to communicate, even though communication always kind of most problems in, relationships and businesses or families, it kind of comes back to communication, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, has that helped you?
Communication is a lifelong journey of getting better at it. I think for a lot of people, nobody's a professional communicator. I know one of my big problems is holding things in. Like I'd rather just figure it out on my own and not ask for help and that kind of thing. And that will come back to bite you. And I ended up going to counseling for a few years, and it helps a lot. So a lot of people just need to open up and, like, as hard as it is, just talk about it, and it's okay to seek help. But in terms of learning about communication, you mentioned babysitting. I definitely understand the kids a lot better after taking those developmental psychology courses, and I can understand better, like, what they need when they're hurting. And it's really just about learning people and watching people. And, like, I know your daughter Eiley needs different attention when she's hurt than Adler or Elam or Lowen. They all need something different. But really, at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be understood. They want their pain to be understood, even if it's just something simple, like they fall and scrape their knee. Just like, oh, I'm sure that really hurts. Like, I'm so sorry that happened. Are you okay? What do you need? What can I do for you? Like, that's all they need at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that is kind of like that learned empathy, as you're applying that throughout babysitting and throughout life.
Yeah, and even as adults, like, that's all we really need, like, from friendships, relationships, even going to counseling. We just want someone to understand our pain and what we're going through and help us navigate it better.
So you think empathy, or think or know, empathy is something that we can all get, like, I can get better at that, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't have to just assume that I'm just going to be a person that doesn't care. I can actually work on it.
It's definitely a skill that you can develop, yeah.
How would I do that?
It takes just intentionality, I guess, being intentional in what you say to people and how you react to things. And even in that performance of caring course that I took, you learn about, like, if someone discloses something to you, like if you open up and you're vulnerable about some trauma or, like, something in your past, and I just go, oh, that sucks. Like, that tells you that I'm not listening and I don't really care. But if I, like, grab your hand or I lean in and I say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And it's about the tone, it's about the eye contact, to let people know that you really do care. And sometimes people struggle with that, but it's definitely a skill that you can develop, not just a talent that you either have or you don't.
And as the recipient, you can pick that up right away.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can tell right away if someone, like, it's so obvious. It's like if someone actually cares, or if they're just trying to move on from the conversation, or if they want the conversation to be about them, or like the Fight Club thing where it's like you're just always thinking about your next turn to talk. You're not actually engaging in the person.
Yeah.
You can feel that. Yeah. Why I've heard this a lot. I have done a small amount of counseling. Like, I mean, as a pastor, I do counseling here and there, but it's not counseling like you learned how to counsel. Like, you learned, like, going to school for it. For me, as a pastor, pastoral counseling is more spiritual or biblical. So it would be, what does God's word have to say about this?
Yeah.
How do I get closer to the Father, closer to Christ, things like that. But in terms of going to counseling, I've gone to counseling a couple times, And it's always like, I mean, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here for a second, but I'm also kind of being honest too with you, because I've found a little bit of the value in receiving the counseling, but I've also kind of been like, felt like, I don't know if I need you to tell me how to think, or, so like, how do you explain to me why everybody should go to counseling? Like, what am I gonna, like, cause I think like if something crazy happens in my life, or I'm really, grieving a loss or something like that, I look at it and say, okay, I need to talk to somebody about this. I need to talk to not just a friend, not just a pastor, not just my mom and dad. Like, I need to talk to a professional about this.
Yeah.
Then I get that I need to go do that. But if I'm just going through my life feeling like things are going well, why do I need that?
I would say I don't think everybody needs to go to counseling. I think if anybody wants to, no matter where they're at in life, then I support that. I think it's a good thing. I went to counseling. I started in my first year of college and continued that for a few years. And I actually went a bit last spring because my grandma passed away the beginning of this year. And I just found it as a safe space to talk about whatever's on your mind and on your heart. It's a sense of unburdening yourself, and because they're a professional, they're an unbiased party. They're an unbiased opinion and observer and like in your life. And I think that's really special, because talking to a friend, you'll get their opinion, or your parents know everything, or they already have their ideas of what's going on in your life. But if you go to a professional who just cares and only knows what you tell them, they are unbiased and they can really help you see things more objectively, and that's really important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I I like the idea of unburdening yourself, right? Because we all carry everything with us all the time. And I know I've had pastor friends who will intentionally drive to a community, maybe 30 minutes or an hour away, to sit down with a counselor and just to kind of unload in a way that they know, like, it feels good to get it off your shoulders with a professional who knows, like, it's not going anywhere. You're not going to go back home and somebody's going to spill the beans, to people that don't need to hear about it, or it's not going to affect your everyday life or your career or anything like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And it's really cool to be like completely, unbiased. It's like your friend has, we probably don't all have very many friends that don't hold back a little bit, right? To preserve the friendship, or just to be nice.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense. I like that idea. Is there, would you say, would you say there's a difference, positive or negative, between a quote unquote regular counselor, or however you would say that, compared to a Christian counselor? Is it important for me to find somebody that shares my faith or worldview, or what have you seen about that, or studied about that?
I would say it's important to find a counselor who shares the same values as you. Not necessarily the exact same religious views, but I would say that you should try to find somebody who lines up with your worldview, yeah. Because my counselor, she doesn't market herself as a Christian counselor, but she is a Christian. And so we were able to discuss some of those things, like how prayer plays in, and she recommended some good books for me that were Christian, and that does help a lot. But if you disagree with your counselor on fundamental things, it's going to be really hard to have a healing relationship.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Especially when you're talking about grieving, like the loss of your grandmother, it would be super important that you're sitting down with somebody that understands her faith, your faith, and the hope of heaven and all of that, rather than someone with more of an agnostic kind of point of view.
Yeah, and a lot of counselors are trained to keep their own personal views out of the relationship, so that anybody who walks in their door, like, it doesn't matter what they believe or where they're from, because the focus is on the patient, like the client, that person that comes in needing help. So most of them don't let those things bleed into the relationship, unless they do line up. Like I said, with my counselor, we were able to talk about our similar Christian views.
So do you think that's a positive to kind of, I guess, so that would be like counseling by the book?
Yeah.
Rather than by the person.
Yeah, but we're human. That's really hard to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
If someone walked into my office and is saying all this stuff is completely opposite of what I believe, it would be so hard to say, I support you.
Right.
That's really, really, really hard to do.
It would be. And so at that point, if you find yourself in that situation, what do you do? How would you handle that?
I think it depends on the situation, because ethically, you shouldn't turn people away just because they're different from you. But I think if you're a private practice and you say, like, I'm sorry, I'm a Christian counselor, I help people from that standpoint, I don't think I can help you, but I can refer you to a colleague that I know who will be able to help.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, or you kind of look at it and say, well, here's the by the book answer. This is what I would recommend. I know I would kind of, I always think it's like, okay, so here's how I would counsel you if you were accepting my Christian worldview. Just to kind of get, like, I don't know how much freedom you'd have in that position, but it'd be like, hey, here's what I think you should do. This is what I think is the right answer. This is the best answer for you. But I'm also going to point you in this direction because I want to serve you well and give you what you want. And do you think that voluntarily doing the grief counseling is being on that side of psychology? Is that something that's in what ways do you see that as going to help you in your career as you know what I mean?
Being the client in a counseling situation.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think about what the client is going through, and how to make that, like, the environment and the process more comfortable and helpful for them. Because I know, like, sitting in that seat, what I needed and what I expected and what I hoped to gain from it. But, like, while I do know a lot about counseling from the client perspective and a little bit from the professional perspective that I learned in school, my master's is in life coaching, which is quite different. They seem interchangeable and they seem very similar, but counseling is a lot about processing past trauma and dealing with things in the past that have happened to you. It's a lot about making and treating a diagnosis if it's clinical. Whereas, and, like, while I do value that, I think it's really important. I didn't want that for my career path, and I chose not to go for licensure for that. And coaching is more focused on the present and the future, which I found really hopeful in studying that. In its basic form, coaching is saying, like, let's take a look at where you are right now in your life, like where you are in this season, in this phase, what's going on with you internally, externally, like let's get a full picture of where you are right now. And then let's come up with goals for where you want to be and what you want your life to look like, and creating a vision for who you want to be and where you want to be in the future. And then bridging that gap and coming up with practical steps to get you there. And so I find that really optimistic, and I love that. And I don't think that you can create a healthy life vision and work to get there until you've processed the past if you're struggling with things, and until you work to combat any diagnoses that you might have. But I also don't think that the work on the past really holds any value until you apply it to now and the future. Because if you're not going to get better from learning about the past, then you're just going to repeat it, right? Mm-hmm. Then you won't get better. So I think it's a 2-part process.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. And it has that hopeful side. So you're able to really sit down with someone and dive into what their life has looked like and what they want their life to look like, and build out a plan and say, here's how we get there. Yeah. So so those are really the opportunities you're looking for, is because you get to really, really love somebody well and feed into, and just kind of feed into them well and see them grow. And is that something that, would that be like a long-term relationship? How long, or is it something where you just kind of hope that maybe someday they come back and say, hey, it worked out, here's how well I'm doing, or you bump into them at Starbucks or something like that?
Yeah, it depends. Everything's individualized. So somebody might make an appointment and need one session because they're struggling with what to do with one specific decision that they just need to talk out and work out the pros and cons with somebody. Or somebody might feel like their life is a total mess and they don't know what to do tomorrow, and like nothing seems right and they're just upset and not happy, and that could take a while, but it just depends on the person and what they're dealing with and how often they want to meet. But I think the hope with a coaching relationship, as with a counseling relationship, is that it's not supposed to last forever. It's about building autonomy, and it is about helping that person to heal themselves and to figure out their own path, and eventually they won't need you anymore, and that's when you know that you did your job, because they're able to handle things on their own now.
Amen. Yeah. That's kind of a people business thing, right? And everything, even with like what your dad does with strength and conditioning, there's a walking with the client, but then at some point the client needs to kind of fly on their own, right? It's like, you can do this. I'm here to help, but you can do this. I know when I think about my past and times when I've been stuck on terms of like, what am I going to do vocationally, career-wise, what I'm just going to do in life. There have been lots of times when I could have used someone like you. And so I definitely see the value in that, because you're saying, hey, like, your past is important, but we need to kind of come to terms with that and process that. But yet we also we want to be hopeful. We want to look at what's going on today. We want to look at the future. So you're really kind of helping someone that is kind of stuck. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I know for me, the couple years after college, I was more stuck than I have ever been in my life. I was very lost, very unsure. I kind of had studied something in school that I didn't think was the direction that I needed to go. Relationships had fallen apart, and I just felt very much stuck in a rut for like a year or two, and didn't know how to get out of it. And so lots of talking to friends and family, and a little bit of talking to spiritual guides or pastors in my life, but mostly I just sort of struggled. Like, most of them just like, I just kind of grin and bear it and struggled through it. And I look back on that and I think, man, if I would have been a little bit more honest with the right person, a person like you, and sat down with you, or drove to another town and found a real good counselor. And I actually, at that time, I did try a little bit of counseling at that time. But absolutely, we're surrounded by people that need that kind of guidance. And so is that that sounds to me like that's what really gets you excited about this, is getting to see people flourish, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It's getting to see that growth and just helping people to heal and to learn those skills to help themselves in the future and to help them get the ball rolling on their goals and their dreams. And it's just so exciting to me.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's awesome. And getting to see that tangible positive effect that you're having in someone's life. Like, that's what I want out of my career, is to see a positive impact and know, like, I helped them do that. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can look back across your client list or your business or your community and say, look at the impact that I've had on the world. This is great.
Yeah.
And I love that. And then so is there anything else in terms of psychology or life coaching that you fell in love with through school?
I don't know. I think I covered.
You feel good?
It.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So all of these same kinds of passions, this and the empathy and being unburdened, all of that, I imagine that's kind of what you pour into poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you, can you recite some poems off by heart for us?
I cannot. I don't have them in my head.
Not your own.
No, they live on my laptop.
Okay.
Yeah, I started writing. I wouldn't have even called it poetry when I first started writing. It was like early high school, and I just had all these feelings. I had all these emotions,
Okay.
and I was just sad and
High school kids have a lot of feelings.
yeah. And it started with a journal, and I would just word vomit like whatever was in my head, and eventually it started sounding kind of pretty, and it was like full of metaphors, and I started getting more ideas, and it's like any strong emotion I had that I didn't know how to express, just talking about it, I could write about it, and that was much easier, and that was much more cathartic. And so I got a lot of my feelings out that way. Yeah.
So it became a way that you just process what you're feeling and what you're going through.
Yeah.
And it just, you're one of those people that just kind of happens to come out beautifully and rhythmically.
Sometimes.
And metaphorically. And
I try. Yeah.
Good. And so eventually you turned that into a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I did a self-published book called Self-Esteem Engine, and it's mostly things that I wrote in high school. So
Okay.
I think overall it's more in depth into, I would say, sad feelings, like my sad feelings about, like, I don't know who I am, this world is crazy, like that kind of thing. There are some more hopeful ones in there that are more faith-based, but there are some that also talk about how a negative or toxic church environment can impact someone, because the church I went to growing up was not a very healthy environment, and I didn't know what a church family could or should feel like until I came to One Life Church. And so it's a little bit of everything in that book, from like my high school teenage feelings.
Kind of walking through that journey. And it's like
Yeah.
the poetry is poetry kind of like music, though, in that it's the sad is what sells. You know what I mean?
In
like,
a way, I guess. Yeah.
like it's maybe for poetry sells isn't the right word, but it's like it's what it hits a lot of people where they're at.
Yeah. It's
You know,
what
'cause-
relates to people is those strong emotions. And I think in another way, it's a lot of like the love songs are popular. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I hear that.
I've written a lot of
You-
love poetry in the last couple of years, and that's all Joel's fault.
Are you a ghostwriter for Taylor Swift? Is that what?
No, I'd be making a lot more money if I was.
Okay. But Joel, your fiance, he's
Yes.
so could you see that, like, so you talk about writing emotional, sad, painful poetry because you just feel lost and feel like you're in a
Yes.
tough community when you're in high school, and then you went through school, you met the love of your life,
Mm-hmm.
as And so can you look back through all your poetry and see this constant transition? Because then you still have your ups and downs. Like,
yes, it's very cool to look back and see, because it's like my diary in a way.
Yeah.
So I can look back at my book that I did and I read through it and I'm like, that's sad. Like that was, whew, like I don't even want to go there. Like,
must have been a bad day.
Yes. I was struggling a lot with depression and anxiety, which is why I went to counseling in the first place and kind of fell in love with mental health and trying to figure out like what was wrong with me, you know. Mm-hmm. But that all came out in my poetry, and so looking back through, it's like I write them in such strong emotional states that when I read them later, I like can't even relate to them, if that makes sense. Like, I'm like, who even wrote that? Like, that wasn't me. That couldn't have been me. I was never that sad, but I was. But, you know, you heal and you grow, and then you, like, detach from those feelings. And so it's like, so I have a wide range. And I look back through, and it's, like, all the sad stuff. And then it gets, like, a little more hopeful. And then it's, like, all love poems. And, like, his eyes are so blue. And, like, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you can definitely see a transition.
Yeah. That's a cool journey.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then what was it like to take like something like you're pouring your whole heart and soul into this stuff on paper, and that's releasing for you in the same way like with a songwriter needs to get it out, or like you seem like you're I don't know, like you process through writing like, as an introvert. Mm-hmm. And I process through speaking, like just talking. For me to sit down with a pen and paper, this takes forever to get this on paper. I'm just gonna go for a walk in the woods and just talk to myself or yell at the trees. Yeah. You know, just kind of like it's easier for me to express it verbally and just quicker. And I guess that's why I always talk. But and I always find that. Maybe you're the same way maybe with writing, where you start to write and things come out that you didn't even necessarily know were in there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
See, that's how talking is for me. It's like, whoa, I didn't know that bothered me so much.
Yeah.
But it just kind of comes out quick.
Yeah.
And so you did that. You're putting your whole heart out there, and then you're putting it into a book with the self-esteem engine. And did you hesitate at all to go public with that?
Not really, because I knew that it wouldn't like blow up. Like I knew it wasn't gonna. It was just something fun that I did, mostly for myself. And I had a few friends and family members ask me, like, "Are you gonna do a book of your poetry?" And I was kind of I'm like, no. Like, why would I? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then I realized, like, I kind of have enough poems to do a book, and it's kind of really easy to write it yourself and put it together and self-publish. So I just did it like mostly for fun. But I loved when somebody would reach out to me and be like I gave it to a friend and they loved this poem, or like this really related well with me, or like my cousin is an English teacher and she used a couple poems in a poetry section she was doing with her students. And like I think that's really cool.
That is cool.
So the hope is just that somebody will relate to it and feel like they're not alone. And feel like somebody understands what they're going through and sees what they're going through, and like the hope that even though it hurts right now, it'll get better.
Yeah. That to me, so have you, before I say this, have you had any criticisms or pushback through any of that?
No.
No? All positive?
Yeah.
All good?
Good. Yeah. I haven't had a ton of feedback, just in general. I think it's sold like 50 copies.
Did you say 50 million?
Yeah.
50 copies?
Maybe next week it'll be 50 million.
We better get this. We'll get this episode up and double your sales overnight.
Yeah. Blurb.com.
Blurb.com/self-esteem engine.
Yep.
Okay. I love that because like the poetry and publishing, that all just connects right in there with your heart for life coaching and psychology, because and even understanding my kids when you're babysitting, because you're putting this out in the world, and anybody that does content creation, anybody that, spreads their voice out in the world, is you're hopeful that it impacts somebody's life, and that's what matters. Because, and that's what I love about doing things like that is you don't even have to be there. You've sold 50 or so copies of that book, and so you've got at least 50 people have access to that book that they can sit down and they can read it. They can be encouraged by it. They can be impacted by it, and you don't even have to be there.
Yeah.
You created it, and you just kind of spread it out in the world and said, I hope that this touches some souls.
Yeah, I don't even have to be in the room to say, I see you and I care about you.
Yeah.
And you're not alone and I'm here for you. And that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. Well, Mackenzie, I've had a lot of fun talking to you.
Me too. Thanks.
Thank you for coming on to Everyday Calling.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a lot of fun, and I am excited about your upcoming marriage and seeing where life takes you and how many people you impact along the way. So have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
There were days where we thought we wouldn't make it out, but we stuck it out. Today's our day. Today's our day.